Boom, we're live. Hello, world. Jim Hustle here from Larp Music, back with another musical musing, I suppose. This is the fifth of my musings this week, one every night of the week, and I'm going to be doing another one every night of next week at 6 p.m. And today, the subject is working for free, but also conversely, how much to price yourself, how much to charge as a freelance composer or a music producer. Um, both questions, I think, which I kind of have wrestled with, and probably still to a certain extent in terms of how much to price things at, I still do wrestle with. But I'll be sort of talking through in a couple of examples. There's a guy called Arman who got in touch with a question about this, who I'll be sort of addressing that specifically, and also giving you sort of just explaining how I go about pricing things. Without further ado, I think the first thing I want to sort of mention is working for free. A few people reached out. Arman was one of them, asking whether or not you should work for free. And by the way, this is an entirely interactive thing. So if you do have any questions or comments you'd like to add, please do hit me up in the chat. Or if you're watching this as a pre-record, do let me know in the comments section. But yeah, should you work for free? And I think my take on this personally is yes. When you're starting out, you need to work for free because you need to get some credits under your belt, some professional work experience. Is one thing to sort of have a portfolio of things that you've done, as part of a curriculum in an educational institution. But I think you need to get, or one needs to get some real world experience, and it's a very tough sell if you haven't got experience. The question is like, you can't get the work unless you've got experience, but yet you can't get experience unless you get the work. So it's this sort of chicken and egg scenario that pans out. So absolutely yes to doing work for free because that removes an element of risk for whoever's employing you. I'll tell you a little bit about one of my first paid gigs in a minute. So yes to working for free. However, you can't do it indefinitely. You can't continually work for free. At some point, you need to say stop. You need to put in place a boundary and say, okay, I am working now, and as such, I need to be remunerated for the work that I'm putting in. So yes to working for free to build up the show reel, build up the credits, but it's also at some point saying stop. Enough is enough. I know the value that I'm bringing to this project, so you need to be paid accordingly. So the question from Aman was, how can I get a job where I get paid? So his situation is, if I've understood it correctly, is Aman is working for a company based in India who hired him off the back of seeing his portfolio and really liked it. Now, Aman refers to this as volunteer work. It might be semantics, but I kind of see volunteer work as something you do for a charity that you can't afford to pay you. And if that's the case, if this company is that, then that's fine. But if it's a company that is a profitable enterprise, Arman, then it's not really volunteer work. It's, maybe it starts out as an internship, but if you're still working for this company and they're still not paying you, then I think, it's up to you to say, okay, that's it, I'm done working for free. If you want me to continue working for you, then you have to start paying me because that's the way things work. And I know that can be difficult because the sort of immediate thought is, well, I don't want to lose them as a client. But it's also very important to sort of say, if you're working for a client who doesn't pay you, you have to ask yourself, in the long term, is that the kind of client that you want? Who is your perfect client? Hopefully the perfect client is someone who not only values what you do, but also is prepared to actually pay for the work that you do. So I think it sounds like if you've been working with this company for a long time for free, they're probably not going to come to you and go, oh, hey, Arman, by the way, we should really start paying you, because at the moment they're getting away with paying you nothing and you're doing the work. So if it's up to you to sort of go, okay, guys, by the way, you need to pay me now. Otherwise, I'm going to have to move on to other projects. And if they value you, then they should have no problem doing that. So that would be my first sort of thought on that question. But Arman, you also asked another question regarding, you said, I have hundreds of hooks for the imaginary characters that I have in my head. It sounds like you want to sort of score film, or you want to sort of make film. With that, I would say, don't wait for someone to come along and offer you the opportunity to start doing that. If you have loads of ideas, then get proactive and start creating those ideas. just as musical ideas, to get them out of your head and just create stuff. For starters, doing stuff that you're just passionate about is very good for the soul. But second of all, it's a creative outlet for you. But then you can also take those musical ideas to animators or filmmakers that you like and respect and say, hey, look, these are musical ideas I've got. I would love to work with you at some time. Rather than going to a director and saying, hey, I've got loads of musical ideas and you'll have to trust me, they are going to be amazing. If you can go to them and say, hey, these are my musical ideas, do you like them? And if so, would you like to work together? I think that's, a more empowering position to be in. If you caught the video that I did on Monday, which is up on YouTube and Facebook, talked about when you go to someone, rather than going to someone asking them to help you, go to them and try and solve a problem for them. Don't go turn up empty-handed going, please help me out. It's like, go to them with something concrete that you can give them. So that is the sort of specifics to your, hope that helps, Arman. But yeah, it sounds like, boundaries, you have to have boundaries. And if somebody is going to sort of continue exploiting your work for free, then it's up to you. They're not going to be the ones to put the boundary in place. It's going to be you. Ollie Barton back in the house, regular. Thanks, Ollie. I thought it was a good idea as well, because I think obviously most people in the industry, whether it be producing or composing, you are going to be freelance, and it is a difficult line to tread. What's Ollie saying? Let's have a look at this. I think there's a definite confidence thing about it where you need to know when your work is good enough to charge, so you definitely need a dedicated, trusted network who you can show your work to. That's definitely true, Ollie. The one thing I will say is that I think your work is good enough to charge, and I'll touch on this when we come into pricing in a minute. But I will draw on that, Ollie. By the way, if anyone does have any comments or questions or issues that they've faced, pop them in the comments or the chat, and I will address them. I will help you in whatever way I can, because it's I have been there, and in terms of pricing, I still go there from time to time as well. So that was a question from Arman. So the other thing I wanted to mention was as well, because quite a lot of my channel is dedicated to production music, because I do a lot of production music. Some independent production music libraries will ask you to write music for free, and it's a punt, it's a gamble. If it's a new library, you're taking a big gamble because you don't know whether they're going to be successful. And if it's a small library, you've no idea how much revenue it might potentially earn you. So it's an educated guess. The bigger libraries like Universal tend to pay a fee, and they also pay you a mechanical buyout. EMI, I believe, pay a fee. West One don't pay a fee, I don't think. BMG do pay a fee. So yeah, it varies. Ninja Tune don't pay a fee certainly they didn't pay me a fee. I don't think they generally do. It's generally the reserve of bigger libraries. But then my personal take on is if a production music company is prepared to pay a fee, or even an advance, sometimes it's an advance. It's quite rare to find advances now, but even if it's an advance, it at least means that they're shouldering a little bit of the risk, or at least making a statement of intent. It's like, we believe in this library, we believe in your music, and we believe that we can exploit it, so you don't have to shoulder 100% of the risk. Because if you're working for a library that doesn't pay, you might write a tune, it might never get used in it, you might sort of come to nothing. And by the way, if you are interested in production music, there is a link in the description below this to a free webinar that I've done explaining what it is, how it works, how you get paid, which the best libraries are, and also to hopefully I've tried to give you some concrete steps that you can implement in your writing and producing to make your music work better to picture, and sort of hopefully you get more sync placements that way. So again, link in the description below, but it's a free webinar chock full of information. So we've kind of covered, working for free is definitely something worth doing. But how do you actually go about pricing your music? It's a really difficult question to ask. I worked out with the first TV commission that I ever got, I earned about 23 pence per hour. If you're in the US, that's probably about 15 cents. I don't know. 23 pence per hour. And there was also the caveat at the beginning when I started the job that if the music was shit, they wouldn't use it or pay me. But I was a risky proposition. I had no previous experience. They were giving me a chance, which first of all I was incredibly grateful for. But to remove the risk, it was basically all on me. I had to shoulder all the risk. But I was confident. I thought, I can do this. I will prove that I can do this. So I'm happy to take that risk because I know that it will be good and I know that they will pay me. And they did pay me, but it was just a very small amount. And due to the number of hours that I did, going above and beyond and trying to prove myself, it worked out to be 23 pence per hour. Now, how do you charge? So generally when it comes to, it's different, so I'm going to tackle music production and music composition differently because I had a different approach when I was producing artists. When it came to artists, I was producing, well, I had a day rate, and I would sort of estimate how many days it would take me to finish producing the artist's track, and I would generally charge a sort of a project fee. Actually, it's not that different because I do the same with composing. And similarly with composing, I will look at the gig. I will make allowances for, are there going to be real do we need to hire musicians? Do we need to hire additional studio space somewhere bigger than my studio? And I will also work out what I want to be receiving on a daily basis. Is it, basically what am I wanting to receive on a daily basis in order to make it worth my while? I don't usually charge a day rate for a compositional project, because I think if you're employing someone to do music for you, you want to know what you're going to get and for how much. You don't want this sort of open-ended question of like, okay, well, I'll just have to keep paying day rates until the project's finished. I give them a concrete figure. If it takes longer, then that's on me. I have to sort of pick that up, and I usually do, because I'm the world's best at underestimating how long it actually takes to do something. And if it takes less time, then great. I make more money for the amount of time put in. But I use a day rate just purely as a way to gauge whether or not I'm getting value out of it. Because if I'm making £50 a day on a project, it's not worth me doing. If it was like a super high profile project, then you've got to ask the question, is it worth the credit? I'm at a point in my career whereby I'm not prepared to work for below a certain amount, because if a client doesn't value what I do and isn't prepared to pay for it, then I have to ask the question, do I want them as a client in the first place? Because I generally want to work with people who value what I do, and who are prepared to pay accordingly. So working out what you want to get on a day basis, which obviously if you're starting out is probably going to be much lower. I think I used to charge about £150 a day when I first started. Again, because it's also knowing your worth. It's a difficult landscape to navigate, and as Ollie says, it's knowing your worth and feeling that what you're doing is worth it. I think if you're putting in the time and the effort, then hopefully it is worth it from the beginning. But obviously when you're less experienced, you're probably going to be charging a lot less than when you've got experience, because again, when you're experienced, if you've got experience scoring films or TV programs, you're much less of a risk for the person hiring you. They've seen your work, they know what you can do, they know that you will deliver, or they certainly have confidence in what you deliver. Having said that, I will also point out that it is actually quite common for composers to get fired from jobs halfway through. I know several composers who've been hired. I'm not going to mention names, but in fact, Ramin Djawadi, who did Game of Thrones, he took over from a fired composer to do that score. So it's not completely uncommon, and I don't think that's because those composers have any lack of ability or skill. I think that's generally usually with whoever's hired them and their ability to kind of communicate what they want. Who knows? I'm inferring from that. But yeah, so when you're starting out, you're going to be charging less, but I would sort of use what you would like to get on a daily rate to make it worth your while, and then price the project accordingly. One thing I would like to say as well, though, on the subject of pricing high, I often hear people talking about, you don't want to price too high in case that you price yourself out of the market. It's like, if that's your rate, that's your rate. And also, you also have to remember, if you price high, when you give someone that fee, so here's an example. I took on someone to do some content writing for me. When I asked them how much they charged, they told me they charged £400 a day. My first reaction when they said that was, wow, they must be good. So it's not always a case of, wow, that's too much, I'm not prepared to pay that. It's like, my first reaction to that £400 a day for content writing was, wow, they must be good. And exactly the same can be said for you and what you're pricing. So if you're pricing and you price high, you may be sort of worried about pricing yourself out and not winning the work. But at the same time, price tells a story. Seth Godin talks about this quite a lot in his book, This is Marketing. Price tells a story, and if you price high, that tells a story about how good you are. Obviously, you need to be able to deliver on the back end of that, because if you can't, then you have outpriced yourself, and the chances are you might not get employed by those people again. But pricing high isn't necessarily a bad thing. It tells a story. So that's my 2 cents worth on that. So there you go. I think that's kind of pretty much it. Aman, hopefully that's answered your questions. Doing work for free, yeah, totally. You have to when you're starting out. Even now, I'm doing a project at the moment which is for free. And I said I wouldn't do any more free films, but this one came along and I really liked it, and I like the guys who are doing it, and I'm doing it. But if you're watching this, you two, you know who you are. This is the last one I'm doing for free, okay? But yeah, certainly when you're starting out, doing stuff for free is totally worth it to get the credits, to get the experience. But then at some point you have to draw a line and say, okay, no, I know my value. If people want my music, they have to start paying me for it. It's difficult, I know, but it's certainly very important. Yeah, so if you have any sort of specific questions, you can type them in the chat right now and I will address them right now. You have a few minutes before I go off and eat my cabbage roses and drink my tea. If not, pop them in the comments section on YouTube and or Facebook, and I will address them at some point. But hopefully that's helped. I know it's a tricky line to tread, particularly when you're sort of starting out. But yeah, as I say, any questions, then let me know. And if there's any, as I say, I'm going to be doing more of these live musical musing type things next week. So if you have any specific questions, like on the subject of producing, mixing, writing, marketing, business, mental health, etc., then do let me know. library@larpmusic.com, and I will try and cover those questions in one of my live broadcasts, my musical musings next week. I do them every night at 6 p.m. for the moment. Don't know whether I'm going to be doing it every night at 6 p.m. forever, but certainly fairly regularly. So yeah, please do get in touch. Please do let me know. I've got a question here from Master666110. Have you ever found raising money with a client can soil a relationship? I haven't personally, no, but I see how it can. I think this is why quite often composers or producers will have agents or managers working on their behalf. So you have one person handling the business and the manager, the business and the administrative side of things and the money side of things. So if there's a tough negotiation or any sort of posturing on that front, it doesn't sour the relationship with the composer because you're just the guy who just delivers great stuff. But my philosophy is it should always be a win-win. And if it is a win-win and both parties are on board for a win-win, then and it's just, everything is discussed and above board from the beginning, then I don't think it should soil a relationship. But yeah, I hear you. I think traditionally that's why people like to have representation. I don't have any representation. I do everything on my own. And, it can be difficult having the conversation about money, but at the end of the day, it's business. And it's funny as well with being a creative or being in the creative field, because in no other walk of life or other profession is there an expectation that someone should work for free, or that they should only get paid a very minimum amount. It's like most other professions, people have a rate and people understand that they have to pay for it. But with something artistic, something creative, there's kind of this expectation. I think there's a lack of understanding about how long it takes. And therefore there's sort of like this expectation that stuff can be done for free or for next to nothing, which that doesn't exist in many other industries. One thing I will also mention is when you are pricing work, something that's really important to remember is you are essentially, whilst you are pricing for time, you shouldn't ever lose sight of the fact that you are also pricing for all the time that you've spent studying or that. So if you've spent 3 years at university studying, film scoring, you need to be factoring that into your pricing. It's not just about the hourly rate. And this is why I sort of only use hourly rate as like a rough gauge for how much I'm getting paid for each day that I'm working. But for example, if you're an incredible cellist who's been playing the cello for 20 years, when you're pricing your work, you should be taking into account 20 years of practicing for 2, 3, 4 hours a day, or as a composer as a composer, you get better and you're able to do things quicker, but you also know what works and what doesn't work. And that's all part and parcel of experience. So as you become more experienced, you need to be factoring that in. It's not just about the time spent doing it. And that's why I say, don't just use an hourly rate as the guideline. But yeah, it can be a difficult conversation, particularly we British. I think we sort of worry about talking about money and things like that. But as as a freelancer, whether it be composing or producing, if you don't have representation, you are going to have those conversations yourself. But it's totally normal. In the same way that you would discuss, you go to work for a company, you will discuss your salary, and you need to discuss your salary, and it should be done up front. Certainly when I was producing artists, I would always ask for 50% fee up front as well. So don't be afraid if you're taking on a project someone's taking you on. Don't be afraid to ask for a percentage of that up front, because why shouldn't you? 50% up front and then the other 50% on completion. I've only been stung once in my entire career by someone who wouldn't pay up, which was a particularly horrible situation. But I know the people involved also didn't pay someone else that they'd worked with that I know. Whilst I did take it personally to begin with, I realised actually it's on them. So yeah, hope that answers your question, Master 666110. Cool. So yeah, as I say, guys, hopefully that's helped. If you've got any more comments, then fire them into the comment section really quick now, and I will address them. If not, hit me up at library@larpmusic.com. As I say, I'm going to be doing another 6 live broadcasts next week. That's the week starting beginning of December 2020. So yeah, I will do my best to answer sort of any questions that you may have. I shall wish you a very nice weekend. I should just reiterate as well, if you're interested in production music, free webinar in the description below, talking about basically, I think it's a great avenue for monetizing your music, specifically with passive income. But if you want to know more about that, again, there'll be a link in the description below. And if you're new to the channel, by all means, please do hit the subscribe icon and the bell, so that whenever I post next, you're the first to find out. If you're on Facebook, I don't even know how Facebook works anymore. I think you like it or follow or whatever, but I pop up on Facebook every now and again, but YouTube is my primary channel. So yeah, thank you very much for watching. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you next Monday, 6 p.m. Bye. There's always a pause before I say bye, because I've got to go end broadcast, and then it asks if I really want to end the broadcast. So I'm sort of conscious that I'm sort of looking at the camera and looking back, and it's never quite as smooth as I would like. So let's do that again. So yes, see you next Monday at 6 p.m.